So I've gotten the first couple compression tubes installed. Bolts, washers, the drag wire bracket, the bracket here at the end of the compression tube, so that the bolt's got to go through a bunch of different things. Of course, the scab plate is epoxy to the spar. Then on the other side of the spar, you can see I've got a bunch of washers stacked up, because while I'm fiddling with it, I'd rather not screw the nylon lock nut on and off a bunch of times if I need to remove things and put them back, which is what happened on the first wing. I had to disassemble and reassemble several times, so I don't want to ruin the lock nuts. So I put a bunch of washers on so that the nylon part doesn't, I don't screw the nut on as far as the nylon part. So I've got those tightened up. Now what I'll do, I've just got these two compression tubes in, and now I'm going to tighten up these two drag wires and try to get this bay somewhat square. But I probably won't get them completely tight, just snug, and then I'll put on those end brackets, which is where the interplane strut and the flying wires connect. And then I'll get those tightened up, and then you end up squaring, it's called trammeling. Square this end bay first, so you just adjust the two wires until the spars and the compression tubes are square. And then you move to this bay, tighten these up until this bay is square. And then I'll put the butt rib on, and that gets glued in place, epoxied in place. And then I'll tighten up the third and innermost bay. So I'll start out by snugging up this wire, and I'll get a tighter shot here so you can see how I do that. So this is just a miniature pair of vice grips. That's some cheapo, crappy, communist manufactured brand, but it's the same idea as vice grips. And anyway, it had a couple swiveling pads on the end here, so when you clamped it down, the pads could end up at whatever angle the thing was that you were clamping. Took those off, and then bent this a little bit. Bent the jaws right here so that they would grab a hold of the nylon lock nut square to it and be able to lie next to the compression tube here. So I just clamped that on there, not too tight, you don't want to crush the nylon lock nut. And then these two nuts that are jammed together, you just turn those. And if I'm screwing this way, I'll use this nut. If I need to unscrew it, I'll use this nut, because that way this nut will push against this nut, or this nut against that nut, and they won't tend to unscrew that way. I think I've got Loctite on there, but they can still come undone if you do that as the wire gets tight. So I'll just do this for a little bit, and then I'll move over to this wire, move this over here out of the frame to the other one and tighten that up. And then you just go back and forth, keeping things relatively square until the wires are snug. So that takes care of that one. And it's not super tight yet, but I'll just go back and forth. And then I'll flip this upside down to grab a hold of the nut over there. And you just do that back and forth until these are tight enough and this is square. You just make minor adjustments to make sure that the bay is as square as you can get it. So this is a little jig that the plans show you how to make. Certain dimensions here, and well, really the dimension is from here to this, and from here up to this. And the plans have you just drill one hole a certain distance up and from the end, right here. And then you take this jig, stick it right there, line the hole in these brackets up with this hole, and it tells you where this bracket should go. And when you've got it in the right spot, you drill these two other holes. These are not lining up perfectly for me, and they didn't in the first wing either. The hole in this is maybe a 1/16 of an inch too far that way. So what I think I did for the first wing is just use a little smaller bolt, stick it through there. Anyway, then and I think you can make some adjustments when you bolt it to the plane. I think what you do is you hook or get the wings maybe get the front one mounted to the plane, and then drill the mounting hole for the rear spar after you've adjusted the wingtip to be in the exact right spot. I think that's the idea. So this doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's right. So anyway, use this, get these holes lined up, make these immobile, then you drill these 2 holes through the spar and then bolt them, and do the same thing with the rear spar. It's the same, use the same jig there. And then this is the compression, it's not really a compression tube, but it serves the same purpose as a compression tube here on the butt rib. Then I get that epoxied in place. Then I can tighten up this final set of drag wires, and I'll be done with the drag wires. And the brackets, all the brackets for the wing. Actually, I ended up using a transfer punch. They're nice and smooth, they're long enough here. The 3/16 bolts were a little too short, and I thought I could come up with something better, and it didn't fit snugly anyway. So I tried a few different transfer punches, because they come in this set in increments of a 1/64 of an inch. So pretty good degree of precision there. So the one I ended up using was 13/64, which is, I guess, 3/64 undersized, and it's a nice tight fit, so it holds the bracket snugly, and it'll get me the best positioning of those holes that I can possibly get. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm not prepared here, I've got this little gizmo, and it's a center punch, or I'm not exactly sure what the word is. It's got a chamfer on the end here, so you can hold it in a variety of different sized holes, and it'll center because of this chamfer. And then you whack it with a hammer. And then what I'll do is use this, and I'll use the hole here that's a 1/64 under a 1/4 inch, and I'll hold the drill bit in there and get it centered up on the indentation I made with this, and then I'll clamp it in place, and then I'll use that size 1/64 under drill bit to drill through here, and this will help guide the bit to go straight through. And then we'll move this over 1 notch, and I'll use the 1/4 inch reamer and ream it to final size. That's it. Do that for these 2 holes, do it for the 2 holes on these brackets on the rear spar, and those brackets will be done. By the way, and this is very important, I did the same thing on the first set of wings. On the first set of wings, though, I actually drilled 1 hole before I realized it. I got these brackets on backwards. For some reason, this looks right to me when I look at the bracket, but it's not. So I went inside and I thought, something's not right here. Let me look at the plans, because I remembered that I had made this mistake on the first wing. This end of the bracket should be over here. This end here should be here. So this just needs to flip around this way. Same with those brackets. So no harm done right now. I'll take the bolts out, flip these around. These 2 holes right here, and same on there, should be vertical. Anyway, those are a couple hints to you, so you don't mess up your spar. So before you drill holes, just make sure you've got these mounted correctly. These holes are vertical. The fat end of the bracket goes out. The skinny end of the bracket goes in toward the wing, toward the spars here. The fat end bolts to the airplane. Now this is mounted correctly. The fat end mounts on the plane, skinny end points out toward the wing, toward the spars, and the 2 holes that I will be drilling are vertical, straight up and down from each other. That is the correct orientation. And one thing to note as well, on the front, the main spar, this flat is up. The brackets on the rear spar, over here, they've got a flat as well, and it goes down. If you look at the plans that show you all the brackets, you'll see that. And also note that when it shows you the brackets and how they mount to the end of the spar, it just shows you kind of a cutoff view here and the end of the spar. It shows you the front brackets and the rear brackets mounted on opposite ends. It shows one bracket mounted on the right end of a spar and the other bracket mounted on the left end of a spar. I don't remember which is which, but that's confusing, I think. I wish that were consistent, but just watch out for that, because that can confuse you about which way the brackets mount if you're thinking that they both show the same end of the spar that the bracket's mounted on. So fat end out, flat up on the main spar, and flat down on the rear spar. Just look at the plans that show the brackets, and it'll clarify all that for you. Double check. Don't just listen to what I said here, but look at your plans and verify that what I'm saying is correct.